Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So a little while back, I got a really cool opportunity to talk to Phil Verster, the CEO of Metrolinx, who's obviously responsible for Go expansion, previously known as Go RER, as well as the Ontario line, the Scarborough subway extension, the Eglinton West extension, the Yonge North extension, the Hurontario LRT, the Finch LRT, the Eglinton LRT, the various BRT projects in the region. Basically, very interesting guy to talk to. He was previously at ScotRail and he worked for some of the suburban railways in London, so very interesting guy to have on the Toronto transit scene. Also, make sure you stay for the end of the video because I'm going to comment on a few things that I think are interesting. Anyways, here's the interview. So I'm really excited to have Phil on today to talk about some of the changes we're seeing in the Toronto Transit Network and to ask him some questions I have, which I think maybe don't always get asked, and so they should be interesting. So thanks so much for coming on, Phil.
Thanks, Reece. It's great to be with you.
So something I've noticed kind of watching the town halls you guys do at Metrolinx is you always do safety kind of presentations at the beginning, and you generally talk about safety a ton. And given that we don't see the horror stories we saw in early subway construction, I'm sort of wondering what is the kind of importance of continuing to push for safety, and in our construction today, kind of what's safety like in North America broadly, if you have some comments.
Yes, Reece, there's a sort of a tongue-in-cheek saying in management that goes like this. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, you can be as clever as you want with whatever strategies you adopt, whatever plans you adopt. Success for an organization to achieve outcomes and different ways of working really depends on the culture you create. And in all of my time in transit, I have always focused on making safety an obsession in my organization. It shows due diligence and due care and due interest for your employees and for your contractors. It cultivates a higher level of engagement. In transit, you cannot be anything but safety conscious. It just totally drives the culture of an organization. I'll give you an indication of this. Our lost time injuries in Metrolinx has dropped by a factor of 7. Not anything, let me say that again, 7 times in the last 3.5 years, where we had a lost time injury frequency rate, that's the number of lost time injuries per 200,000 hours, of 4.2. 3 years ago, we're now down to 0.6. So massively important, and it changes how your organization works. Now, what I've seen in North America is not as much of a focus on benchmarks such as LTIFR, on making sure you get a safety culture that is all-encompassing across your organization, and I think we can do better. And so we've set about, everything we do now is to change the rail industry in Canada, really, and to set examples and to bring practices which everyone else can use as well.
No, fantastic, fantastic. So the next question I have is kind of turning into a different direction about the way we design transit. So in the past, Toronto's been really quite conservative, I think, and inward-looking in the way we've designed transit and kind of developed things. Now with the Ontario line, we're doing an automated metro. We're looking at single-bore tunnels for the Scarborough subway extension. So it seems that we're starting to change that kind of conservative nature. What do you
Absolutely.
think? What do you think the impact of that is?
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Reece, you talk about some of the technical innovations. Yes, there are some, but you know, being an engineer myself, technical innovations are that there's so much good practice throughout the world. Technical innovations are great, but that's not the real key that bring innovation. The real key is how you plan and how you procure. And I'll give you 2 very practical examples. On the 2 tunnels, for the tunnels for Eglinton and the tunnels for Scarborough, we are going to be starting to build the launch shafts in the second half of 2021, couple of months away. We've already got our 2 preferred bidders. We've already got the launch sites secured, cleared, bought and procured. and design work progressing since January. This is within 15 months of starting into the market with a request for qualifications, we are going to start building. And so this is rapid speed brought on by a procurement process which have been less about a procurement contract form, which is a stick, and more of a carrot approach where we offer incentives to contractors to be on site early, to start the work early. And it is an innovation and very different to where we started off sometime I'd say 2 or 3 years ago with a conventional way of buying. And I'll give you a second example. On our Go expansion project, which is truly exciting, it was like a regional railway and therefore making Go more bi-directional. We have changed from 3 years ago, the concept for procurement of these transit projects was a private capital, project finance, fixed price. Again, sort of a sharp stick approach. And we've now adjusted it to a public-private partnership, still a P3, but not private capital financed and not fixed price, sort of a construction manager with a target price and with incentives paid out on performance. So very much move towards a carrot approach in the procurement, very much to get early contractor involvement in the design work, totally focused on not a defensive procurement, a defensive bid, but a positive early contractor engagement, share innovations, share ideas right up front bid. This is a totally different way of doing it, and it is turning out to be extremely impactful and very positive.
Well, it's very exciting to hear that you have so much kind of contractor involvement, because you guys got like Deutsche Bahn, SNCF, MTR, like some really heavy hitters into the ring. And so hearing that they, have involvement in designing and planning this stuff is, I think, very exciting for people who are kind of familiar with the rail industry.
Yeah, let me give you an example, Reece. Just practical examples speak 1,000 words for me. We have 3 big projects overlapping at the new East Harbour station that we are working with Cadillac Fairview and the City of Toronto to get built in the Docklands area. And the 3 projects are Go expansion. We want more trains on the Lakeshore East. The Ontario line is going to have platforms at East Harbour. And then we want to build East Harbour itself, which is going to be the Union Station of the East. So these are 3 massive projects that are intersecting. From the really quality work that we got done by our Go expansion team, it was evident that if we had a third platform, sort of a center platform in the station, we could increase the capacity of trains that can stop at East Harbour by about 8 trains per hour at the peak, higher than the 12 trains we had intended. So we can now stop 20 trains an hour rather than just 12. And that 20 years from now, when capacity gets constrained at Union Station, we will have saved 2 of the 16 roads we would have freed up by having this platform in terms of the reducing the switchover times between lines, which then occupies capacity. So we make, in effect, 8 trains on 12 increase in capacity at East Harbour. 2 platforms, we save 2 platforms out of 16 at Union Station. But more than that, at Scarborough Junction, by putting a center platform at East Harbour, a couple of kilometers down the way at Scarborough Junction, we can now avoid building a rail grade-to-grade separation, which saves us $140 million.
That big flyover that you guys had planned before.
Exactly. Now that's not required because of a station design choice we made further upstream that benefits Union Station as well as East Harbour, as well as Lines Out. You see, this is innovation. Now, this sounds really boring, perhaps, for other people that are not sort of rail geeks like people like you and me. But I'm telling you, this is unique stuff, and it's super exciting to make these changes. I call these once in 60-year, once in 100-year type decisions that we are making now that will massively benefit this network 50, 60 years from now.
No, definitely. So the next thing I want to talk about is, and you already kind of alluded to it, is Go expansion, or what many people may have known as kind of RER is what the previous name was. It's really exciting, obviously, I think, to everyone who's in the industry and just the general public in the GTHA. What cities do you think are kind of models for regional rail for you? When you think of what should Go expansion look like, what cities do you think of? What systems?
Well, 2 or 3 cities that come to mind. The 2 cities that are highest, sort of in my sort of frame of reference, would be Paris. Paris regional rail really came to its own in Paris, but also very much so in London. And operating, when I started out as a fleet director in the rail industry at Southeastern Trains, we served quite a large chunk of the regional rail that ran into London, and that's the mental mind map that we've got. I think what is really exciting about Go and Go expansion is because it's a regional service, it is uniquely affected by COVID, in the sense that if there's more work from home, we are going to see quite a shift in travel patterns and quite a shift in travel preferences. We're already talking to mayors from, the mayor Pickering, for example, very vocal on creating a city center, a business center in the city of Pickering. And we see a future where it's less about a cascade of people in the morning peak traveling into downtown Toronto, and much more two-way all-day people traveling potentially from the center of Toronto out to Pickering to go and work in Pickering. And not 5 days a week, perhaps, but 2 or 3 days a week when they meet in the office in Pickering and the other 2 days working from home. The whole world is going to change dramatically, and we're going to see, I think we're going to see Go change to a higher frequency of trains, shorter trains, more trains, but more connectivity across the region. And it's a super exciting vision to be with a region that is more interconnected, with faster public transit connections on the main railway lines. It's a superb future to look forward to.
No, definitely. And, with Go, you're actually traveling a lot faster than you would be on the subway. So the kind of ability to cross the region is just enhanced,
significantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the last question I want to talk about is kind of a general scope of expansion thing. So I kind of think about other transit systems around the world, again, like Paris, when the RER opened, and, it kind of transformed the city and the network, because that's, it's a huge project, as you mentioned. Given that we're more than doubling the electrified regional rail and local transit, like a rapid transit networks within Toronto, what do you expect the impact of that to be? What project are you most excited about? And what's it like kind of, running the ship at such a transformative time that's, going to transform Toronto forever?
I'll start at the back end of your question. I
can repeat them later if you need if you need reminders. Yes.
Yeah, no. I'll start with the last part of your question. Well, it's super exciting, but it's also extremely humbling to be facilitating things now, which will make big, huge impacts in the future. And my earlier reference to making decisions, which is once in 60, once in 100-year type decisions, just brings it to such a sharp focus. Some of our decisions are about clever commercial choices rather than just technical innovation that helped us to avoid having to build the missing link or the big freight bypass. We saved $5 billion by not having to build a freight bypass, by just being commercially more astute. And so decisions like that are huge and very, very important. But the most exciting thing for me about where we are now, Reece, is for a moment, just think about all of our transit networks. You think about the subway, and it's pretty much a subway with very little interconnectivity except at Union,
For sure.
and one or more places. You think about go, and it's all radial into Union. And so the truly exciting thing about what we are doing with Ontario Line and what we are doing with extensions such as the Eglinton West extension, as well as what we're doing now with the Yonge North subway extension, is we are taking each of these extensions and the Ontario Line and we are creating a network. If you think of the Ontario Line, we'll connect Lakeshore West at Exhibition, Line 1 at Osgood and Queen, Lakeshore East at East Harbour, and then go all the way up to Pape with Line 2, and then connect with Eglinton up at Ontario Science Centre. So the whole concept of a network, the Ontario Line is absolutely a key example of that. But we're doing the same now by connecting the Richmond Hill line very closely to the Yonge North subway extension, and so with each of the other extensions. And jewel in the crown of all of these are probably the Ontario Line and GO expansion.
For sure.
These two are going to be transformative for the region.
Certainly. It's really interesting to finally be seeing a project built in Toronto where it's like almost every other station is a connection to another rail line. It was something you haven't seen yet, and it's just really cool.
And it is the driver, Reece. It is the driver of our thinking. It is one of the biggest issues that I noticed when I joined here three years ago, that there was a lot of fragmented thinking about designs, not pointing any fingers at anyone, but it was just the nature of planning that was happening in separate organizations. Now that we have a strong network focus and a connectivity focus, we're going to give this just total commitment, and it permeates through all of our designs and all of our thinking of how to operate and work with colleagues such as the TTC and other transit agencies.
For sure. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today and to answer some questions. I think your insights are much appreciated by me and my viewers. And yeah, thanks for all you do for Toronto Transit.
Reece, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. So if you're watching this, you are dedicated. So I'll try to not take too much of your time. It was really cool talking to Phil, and he was super nice. And what I think was very interesting to hear from him was, one, about the Scarborough Junction grade separation. I've talked about it before on the channel, and knowing that we don't have to do the fly under there is very interesting. That should hopefully speed up that project. And since I live on the Stouffville line, that's exciting. Two, I think it's very interesting to talk about adding a center platform at East Harbour. I suppose that means that all trains will be stopping at East Harbour. That's very cool and good, because the Ontario Line, Lakeshore East, and Stouffville Line should all be able to kind of interchange at that station. It's a really major transit hub. I think the final thing I want to mention is how interesting it is to just hear about procurement. I know unless you're a really big transit infrastructure nerd, that probably doesn't interest you, but it is cool to hear how they're moving from kind of the stick model, which is, punish the bidders and punish the contractors if they don't meet deadlines and if they don't do things, to a more carrot model. So, setting performance targets and having bidders trying to reach those and trying to exceed kind of expectations instead of punishing them. I think it's interesting to hear because obviously there's a ton of transit projects being built across the country and there's a lot of impact from one to the other. Apparently the Ottawa LRT and all of its problems, for example, had impacts on projects in the rest of the country. So I think it's interesting to hear about that. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.